France set to recognize Palestine at UN General Assembly. Welcome to Contemporary State of Affairs, where we dive deep into the stories shaping our world with curiosity and a critical eye. I'm your host, Inebus, and today we're tackling a seismic moment in global diplomacy: France's historic decision to recognize Palestine as a state at the UN General Assembly. This isn't just a headline, it's a move that could reshape the Middle East, rattle international alliances, and spark hope or controversy depending on where you stand. So, grab a coffee, settle in, and let's unpack why this matters, who it affects, and whether it's a game changer or just diplomatic noise. This is Contemporary State of Affairs, and we're diving in. 1. A historic diplomatic shift. Let's start with the big news. In July 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron stood before the world and announced that France, a major Western power and permanent member of the UN Security Council, will formally recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly. This isn't a small gesture, it's a bold move that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. Israel called it a grave mistake. The United States expressed concerns about escalating tensions. Meanwhile, Palestinian leaders hailed it as a step toward justice, and countries across the global south cheered. So, why is this a big deal? Recognition of statehood is more than symbolic, it's a statement about legitimacy, sovereignty, and the right to exist on the global stage. France is the biggest Western nation to take this step, joining over 140 countries, including Sweden, which recognized Palestine back in 2014. But France's weight as a European powerhouse and a key player in NATO and the EU makes this decision a potential turning point. Today, we're going to explore why France did this, what it means for the Israel-Palestine conflict, and whether this move can actually change anything. But first, let's set the stage. Why now? 2. Why now? The context behind the decision. To understand France's move, we need to look at the world in July 2025. The Israel-Palestine conflict is at a boiling point. In Gaza, the humanitarian crisis is catastrophic. Reports describe mass starvation, with a third of the population going days without food. Ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas have stalled, with the US accusing Hamas of dragging its feet, while others point to Israel's intensified military operations. The death toll is staggering, and international pressure for a resolution is mounting. Enter France. Macron's government has been vocal about the need for a two-state solution for years, but this step feels like a leap. Why now? Domestically, France faces pressure from its large Muslim population and progressive groups pushing for Palestinian rights. Internationally, Macron might be positioning France as a moral leader in the EU, especially as the US takes a more cautious stance. Some analysts suggest this is a response to the Gaza crisis, a way to signal that diplomacy, not just military might, matters. But let's be critical here. Is this about principle, or is it politics? Macron's approval ratings have been shaky, and a bold foreign policy move could bolster his image as a global statesman. Plus, with the EU increasingly divided on Middle East policy, France might be carving out a leadership role. The question is, will this move inspire others, or will it isolate France? Let's dig deeper by looking at the history behind this moment. 3. The historical backdrop. A century of conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most complex and emotional issues in modern history, so let's break it down. It starts with the 1917 Balfour Declaration, when Britain supported a national home for Jews in Palestine, then under Ottoman control. Fast forward to 1948, when Israel was established, sparking the first Arab-Israeli war and displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in what they call the Nakba, or catastrophe. Since then, we've seen wars, uprisings, peace talks, and broken promises. The idea of a Palestinian state has been on the table for decades. The 1993 Oslo Accords promised a path to statehood, but settlements, violence, and distrust derailed progress. Today, Palestine is recognized by over 140 countries, but major Western powers like the US, UK, and Germany have held back, citing the need for a negotiated two-state solution. France's decision breaks that mold, signaling that waiting for a perfect deal might be a luxury the world can't afford. Here's a thought: history shows us that recognition alone doesn't solve conflicts. When Sweden recognized Palestine, it shifted the conversation but didn't stop the violence. So, why should we expect France's move to be different? To answer that, we need to look at who wins and who loses in this diplomatic chess game. 4. The global ripple effect. Winners and losers. France's recognition of Palestine is like dropping a stone in a pond, the ripples are far-reaching. Let's start with the winners. For Palestinians, this is a symbolic victory. Recognition by a major Western power validates their struggle and boosts their case for full UN membership. It could also open doors for more aid, trade, and diplomatic leverage. Countries in the global south, many of whom already recognize Palestine, see this as a step toward a more balanced global order. Now, the losers, or at least those who feel threatened. Israel has called this a reward for terrorism, arguing it undermines their security and legitimizes groups like Hamas. The US, a staunch ally of Israel, worries this could destabilize already fragile ceasefire talks. Within the EU, France's move might deepen divisions, with countries like Hungary and the Czech Republic, which lean pro-Israel, pushing back. But here's the critical question: does this change the power dynamics? France's recognition could pressure other EU nations to follow suit, creating a domino effect. It might also force the US to rethink its approach, especially as public opinion in America grows more sympathetic to Palestinians. On the flip side, it risks escalating tensions in the Middle East, where hardliners on both sides could double down. Let's shift gears now and focus on the human side of this story. 5. The human angle. Voices from the ground. Behind the headlines are real people, Palestinians and Israelis living with the consequences of this conflict every day. In Gaza, the situation is dire. Families are struggling to survive amid shortages of food, water, and medicine. Aid organizations report that children are dying of malnutrition, and hospitals are overwhelmed. For Palestinians, France's recognition might feel like a glimmer of hope, a sign that the world hasn't forgotten them. But hope doesn't fill empty stomachs. On the Israeli side, there's fear and frustration. Many Israelis see recognition of Palestine as a threat to their security, especially after years of rocket attacks and violence. They argue that unilateral moves like France's sideline their right to negotiate a secure future. Both sides feel trapped in a cycle of distrust, and that's what makes this so hard to unravel. Picture this: a Palestinian mother in Gaza, wondering if her kids will eat tomorrow. An Israeli parent in a border town, checking for air raid sirens. These are the lives caught in the crossfire of diplomacy. As listeners, we have to ask ourselves, how do we balance empathy for both sides while grappling with the bigger picture? Let's try to answer that by looking at whether France's move can actually make a difference. 6. Critical analysis. Is recognition enough? Here's where we get critical. France's recognition is a bold statement, but is it enough? Symbolism matters, but it doesn't dismantle settlements, lift blockades, or stop rockets. The Israel-Palestine conflict is rooted in tangible issues: land, resources, security, and identity. Recognition doesn't address those directly. Without follow-through like economic aid, diplomatic pressure, or a renewed push for peace talks, this could just be a feel-good moment. Let's be real. France isn't going to send troops to enforce a two-state solution, and the UN General Assembly, where this announcement will be made, doesn't have the power to enforce resolutions. So, what's France's next move? Will it push for sanctions on Israeli settlements? Advocate for Palestinian membership in global institutions? Or is this a one-off to score points with certain audiences? Here's a tough question for us to chew on. Is this move about justice, or is it diplomatic theater? Macron knows the world is watching, and France has a history of grand gestures. But if this sparks a broader movement, say, more EU countries recognizing Palestine, it could shift the conversation in ways we haven't seen in decades. Let's look ahead to what might come next. 7. Looking ahead. What's next for Palestine and the world? So, where do we go from here? France's decision could be a catalyst. If Germany or Spain follows suit, the EU might tip toward a unified pro-Palestine stance, putting pressure on Israel to negotiate. The US, under its current administration, might face growing calls to rethink its unconditional support for Israel, especially as younger voters demand change. At the UN, Palestine could gain more leverage to push for full membership, though Security Council vetoes remain a hurdle. But there's a flip side. Israel could dig in, escalating military operations or expanding settlements. Hardline groups like Hamas might see this as a green light to reject compromise. And in a world already stretched thin by conflicts like Ukraine or the Thailand-Cambodia border crisis, will the international community have the bandwidth to prioritize this? One thing's clear: public opinion matters. From protests to posts on social media platforms, people are shaping this conversation. As listeners, you're part of that. What do you think France should do next? Could this be the start of a new chapter for Palestine, or just another footnote in a long conflict? 8. Closing thoughts. A call to reflect. We've covered a lot today: France's bold recognition of Palestine, the history behind it, the global fallout, and the human stakes. This isn't just a story about diplomats in suits, it's about millions of lives hanging in the balance. France has taken a stand, but the road to peace is long and fraught. As we wrap up, I challenge you to think critically. Is this a step toward justice, or a risky move that could backfire? And what role do we, as global citizens, play in pushing for a better future? Thank you for joining me on Contemporary State of Affairs. If this episode sparked something in you, share your thoughts under comments. Let's keep this conversation going. Next time, we'll dive into another story shaking the world, maybe the Gaza crisis or the rise of AI in warfare. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and keep asking the tough questions. This is Inebus, signing off.